All right, so photography students, for this project, let me talk to you about what you need to do and what sort of things you should consider. So, for this project, you need to consider your objects. So, think about basically the themes and things you might want to work with. And it's going to be so much about how you photograph and tell a story of the object in your lighting, composition, and placement of the objects in your photos. So on Thursday, you're going to have a really important workshop that I would like you all to attend about photographing objects using the studio, using lighting, and Sam Chick, who is himself fantastic at doing automobile photography and high-end watches, and he's going to give you guys lots of insight into sort of practice behind doing that. I'd like you to research two photographers and connect that sort of research that you've done to how you're creating your final outcome, and think about how they tell a story of the object through the composition and color palette and editing of the objects in their photos. Consider making arrangements of still lifes, looking to contemporary as classical examples to inform your work. For example, if I was going to take pictures of flowers, I might look at, some of these beautiful flower arrangements that come from sort of the Dutch artists that create the crazy flower things. Maybe I try and recreate that in digital photography. Or, you can do experimental work. Maybe the objects get used in the darkroom through sort of photograms or alternative ways. Think about sort of lighting. Maybe you want to build miniature sets and experiment with how you sort of photograph the subject. Keep details of your progress in your sketchbook and produce either an installation or a video or a book or a photo sort of collection of the work for next Friday. It could be also a digital sort of PowerPoint or something like that if that works for you. So for example, here on the right, you've got Kristen Meyer, who deconstructs objects and lays them out in a very sort of formulaic way, grids, that sort of thing, thinking about that sort of composition, and the objects and how they're laid out sort of tell that sort of visual intrigue. The outcome will be a series of experimentations that will be presented in the studio. So select and edit a few images down and that relate to the message or narrative that you've constructed and sort of built around your objects. Your work can be in installations. The objects itself, the way you've presented them, could be part of the work. So it could just be older photos you have and the way you present them, like Annette Messenger over on the right. The way she's presented those photos could be the way you explore presenting your project. The object could be the photo itself. It can be digital or analog. You can use the darkroom or the photo itself. Importantly, it'll be important to trace your research and your idea development to lead into your final outcome. Yeah, so documenting those steps. Look at photographers like Maisha Fukaze, who took thousands of pictures, but the photos he took, he would then work over them. And for example, with the cat one there, it's all these push pins and strings and stuff he did to the photo that changed the photo. Or his series on the right there where he painted on top of the photo and added text and changed the context of the photo through through his further interpretation. He did a whole project based on his lost cat. And then he thought he found it, but then it wasn't his cat. So he's a really interesting photographer to look at. And his work is very much about how it's presented in the installation. You've got Eric Kessel, who I talked about in the other part, who is all about the sort of the way we treat digital photos and the fact that digital photos aren't really printed out, and creating these absolute mountains of photos that just represents 1 day of digital photos that are published online. So it's this idea that the amount of sort of visual information, the amount of photography that exists now, that's almost wasted, and sort of the way we treat photography now compared to the past when we only had 36 images on a roll of film, that's sort of changed. You've got Vic Muniz, who creates these sort of mounds out of these objects, and in the sort of composition and lighting of the things, there's a grotesque sense to it, but if you break it down, they're just normal, everyday, well, I guess not normal, like who's got lots of little babies and bugs laying around, but it's the idea that it doesn't have to be pretty and it can say something. It can be autobiographical, it can be sort of about society and how you kind of create these things, and how you light it and set and stage the objects can make the audience feel quite query make them feel uncomfortable, or it can make people want to buy it. So it's that idea that you can go either way with how you photograph your work. Because look at here, this is Dennis Wojciechowicz. Oh, I hope I said that right. But just at how it's a simple piece of fruit, but his lighting and the sort of pristineness to these images changes the context from it just being a single slice of lime to it looking and feeling like a huge stained glass window in a Gothic cathedral. Very much looking at macro photography. So there is a macro lens on campus, looking at sort of editing an image, very highly edited these, and really looking at how lighting and illumination and basically a cleanliness to the work, which is very different to sort of the work prior to that. Then we've got Mandy Barker, who is a prolific collector of ocean plastic waste, and she tries to create intrigue and dialogue about the waste in our oceans by photographing and composing these images. So these are all basically composites. None of these images are created. Like, she's basically created a library of plastic, and then she composes a lot of these in Photoshop. She photographs them all individually and then lays them all out. Some of the stuff she will put together and then edit together. So this is highly edited, but the way it kind of feels like almost galactic imagery, the sort of sense that you have to take a second look at it to understand what exactly it is you're looking at, creates a new context and creates an interesting part of the work. Then we've got good old Leonard Surya, I think that's how you say his name. Probably butcher that. But this is a really interesting project, and it's on, if you haven't seen the Foam website, this is the Foam Emergent Talent, and this is how he approached his lockdown. He took objects in his home while he was in isolation and created these incredible compositions of like all the things that sort of were blue, for example, and that's him. Or all of his masks and all of these cans and things he had, and how he presented and laid these objects out is as much as important as the image he took. So think about the things you have in your house and how you can explore that, and sort of what it says about you, your life, your situation you're currently in, your likes, your interests, the things that you have, the things that you own, can be explored in this project. And basically, these are all sort of the things I'd like you guys to consider. Like I said, Thursday you've got that workshop, but today, do some further research, develop your project, think about how everything ties in, and start thinking about what the objects are. And it wouldn't hurt to bring the objects in with you for Thursday as well. So maybe you can have a look and a discussion with Sam about how you might capture something.